For centuries, the word samurai has conjured images of loyalty, discipline, and a warrior's honor. These elite fighters ruled Japan's battlefields and shaped its culture for nearly 1,000 years. But what if we told you their legacy isn't only written in scrolls, swords, and castles, but also in DNA? Today, modern genetics allows us to peer behind the myths of the samurai and ask, who were they really, where did they come from, and how much of their story still lives on in the blood of Japan today? The samurai were not just soldiers, they were a warrior class, bound by the code of Bushidō, loyalty, courage, and honor unto death. By the 12th century they had become the political and military elite of Japan, with clans like the Minamoto and Taira dominating power struggles. But they weren't a separate species or even an isolated tribe. They were Japanese men drawn from powerful families, often tracing back to earlier warrior clans that had defended rice fields, villages, and trade routes. So why talk about their DNA at all? Because their story is tied to the deeper origins of the Japanese people. When geneticists look at modern Japanese DNA, they find a fascinating mix. Broadly speaking, Japan's population today descends from two main ancient groups. The Jōmon people, they were hunter-gatherers who lived in Japan for tens of thousands of years. They carried distinctive Y-DNA haplogroups like DM55, and their features included wavy hair, broader faces, and sometimes darker skin. The Yayoi people, on the other hand, were farmers who migrated from the Asian mainland around 2,300 years ago. They brought rice agriculture, metal tools, and haplogroups like OM122, which are more common across East Asia. Modern Japanese DNA is a blend of these two groups, and when we trace the ancestry of the samurai families, we see that blend reflected in them too. Samurai clans often traced their prestige to noble or ancient origins, sometimes even claiming descent from deities or legendary emperors. But genetics suggests a more human story. Some samurai lineages carried haplogroup D, linking them back to the Jōmon, the ancient indigenous population of Japan. Others carried haplogroup O, a sign of Yayoi ancestry rooted in migrations from China and Korea. This diversity reflects the way samurai were formed, not as a single tribe, but as an elite chosen from across Japan's genetic spectrum. So, did the DNA of samurai make them stronger or different? Not exactly, but their genetic background carried traits that would have shaped their lives. Jōmon ancestry gave some individuals robust bone structures and features adapted to Japan's rugged environment. So, Yayoi ancestry brought agricultural know-how and connections to continental Asia, which, really fueled both economic and political power. Together, these influences built the foundation for a warrior class that could, honestly, endure centuries of conflict. Take the Tokugawa Clan, for example, who ruled Japan for over 250 years during the Edo period. Their bloodline wasn't purely Yayoi or Jōmon, but a mixture, the same mixture carried by much of Japan today. Or consider the Shimazu Clan of Kyushu, whose members often showed higher proportions of Jōmon ancestry, reflecting the regional genetic variations of Japan's islands. The genetic story of the samurai is, in many ways, the genetic story of Japan itself. Of course, DNA cannot measure discipline, loyalty, or honor. The samurai spirit wasn't inherited genetically, it was taught, trained, and lived. But what genetics does show is how the warrior class was connected to a much larger human journey. Japan was never entirely isolated. Archaeological and genetic evidence shows contact with Korea, China, and even broader East Asia. Samurai families were not immune to these influences. Through marriage alliances, trade, and conquest, their DNA absorbed traces of the outside world, but always adapted into a distinctly Japanese identity. So, does samurai DNA still exist? Absolutely. While the class system was officially abolished in the 19th century, descendants of samurai families still live across Japan. Their surnames, family crests, and sometimes even genetic lineages remain. But they are not genetically separate from other Japanese people. Instead, they are part of the shared ancestry of the nation. If you took a DNA test in Japan today, you wouldn't find a samurai gene. But you might find the haplogroups and traits once carried by warrior clans who defined Japanese history. The samurai remind us of an important lesson. Genetics can tell us about ancestry, migration, and adaptation, but not about values, honor, or courage. Bushidō was not encoded in DNA, it was encoded in practice, philosophy, and culture. And yet, the samurai story is still a genetic story, because it shows us how history and biology intertwine, how ancient migrations gave rise to new societies, and how those societies produced warriors who would shape the destiny of nations. Why should we care about samurai DNA in the 21st century? Because it's a reminder that identity is layered. Just like the Japanese people today are a blend of Jōmon and Yayoi ancestry, every culture is a tapestry woven from countless threads. And in an age where we search for belonging and authenticity, DNA gives us a new way to appreciate that tapestry. The samurai weren't pure-blooded warriors, they were human beings, carrying the same complexity we all do. The next time you picture a samurai raising his sword, remember, behind the armor was a story written not just in history but in DNA. A story of ancient hunter-gatherers and continental farmers, a story of families and clans. A story that still beats in the hearts of millions of people today. The samurai may have vanished as a class, but their DNA, like their spirit, endures. For centuries, they were more than warriors. They were poets, philosophers, statesmen, and guardians of a way of life. The traditions they carried, of loyalty, honor, and discipline, outlived their battles and found new homes in modern Japan. And beneath those ideals lies something even more enduring: the living inheritance of bloodlines passed down through countless generations. When we speak of the samurai, we don't just recall armor and swords. We recall the farmers who tilled the rice fields that fed them, the artisans who forged their blades, and the families who preserved their lineages. All of these voices combined into the DNA that shapes Japan today. And just as their culture echoes in ritual, in language, and in art, their genetic story carries forward in the faces of their descendants. It is easy to think of the samurai as a relic of the past, frozen in museums and legends. But their real legacy is not trapped in glass cases or history books. It walks among us, alive in the resilience, creativity, and quiet strength of those who inherited their world. And so the samurai endure, not only as symbols of a bygone age but as proof that no people, no tradition, no story ever truly disappears. It changes form, it flows forward, and it finds new ways to live in us. Because history isn't just written with ink or carved in stone, it is carried in our blood, whispered in our spirit, and passed on, one generation at a time.